Chapter 1. The House I Thought Was Safe. I'm Marin Caldwell. I'm 47, a construction project manager who has spent most of her adult life building things meant to last. Roads, bridges, systems other people depend on without ever noticing who made them work. I believed the same kind of quiet reliability existed in family. I believed that if you worked hard, stayed responsible, and trusted the people closest to you, the ground beneath your feet would stay solid. I was wrong. I used to think a front door could be a promise. When I pulled into my driveway after a week on the road, the porch light came on the way it always did, warm and steady, and for a second my chest loosened like it recognized home before my brain caught up. The house sat on a quiet street in a small town outside Richmond, Virginia, tucked behind a maple tree that dropped leaves like copper coins every fall. It was not fancy. It was mine. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, hardwood floors that creaked in the hallway, and a narrow kitchen where I could reach the coffee mugs without standing on my toes. I bought it in 2012, the year my divorce became official, the year I stopped waiting for someone else to decide what my life would look like. My name is Marin Caldwell. I am 47. I manage construction projects for a regional contractor called Tidewater Civil Group, the kind of work that keeps you in a hard hat and steel-toe boots more than it keeps you behind a desk. My jobs take me across state lines, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for weeks. Bridges, drainage systems, road widening, the unglamorous backbone of daily life. I learned early that the world runs on schedules, permits, inspections, and people who show up even when they are tired. I am one of those people. I show up. That habit is probably why my family always assumed I could handle anything, including what they never bothered to handle themselves. My father, Grant Caldwell, is 74 and retired. He spent his life as a union electrician, the kind of man who can tell you exactly how something should be done, and will still tell you if you did not ask. He loves control the way some people love comfort. My mother, Darlene Caldwell, is 71. She is softer in her voice, but just as firm in her priorities. She hates conflict. She hates embarrassment. If you put truth on one side of a scale and appearances on the other, she will choose appearances and convince herself that makes her a good person. Growing up, I learned to be easy. I learned not to need too much, not to take up space, not to start trouble. I was the reliable daughter, the one who returned calls, the one who brought extra folding chairs, the one who did not argue back when my father spoke like his opinion was law. After the divorce, that reliability hardened into a kind of independence. I did not move back in with my parents. I did not ask them for money. I did not ask them to fix what I could fix myself. I made payments on my mortgage, paid my bills, kept my yard trimmed. When my job pulled me out of town, I arranged my life like a project plan. Neighbor to pick up packages, friend to feed my cat, automatic payments scheduled so nothing would lapse while I was inspecting concrete pours in some other county. Still, there were things that required a local signature: renewing a car registration when the deadline hit during a travel stretch, signing for a certified letter, meeting a contractor for a minor repair when I could not be there. Small administrative tasks, the kind of stuff that feels harmless until it isn't. In 2020, when work started sending me farther and more often, my father brought up the idea of a limited power of attorney. He said it like he was offering me a seatbelt. "You're always gone, Marin," he told me over Sunday dinner, the smell of roast chicken and my mother's lemon potatoes hanging in the air. "If something comes up with the house, you need someone local who can handle it." I remember pressing my fork into the potatoes, watching the skin split. I said I already had people I could call. He leaned forward like he was letting me in on a secret. "People outside the family do not care about you the way we do, and you don't want some stranger making decisions when you're 3 states away." My mother nodded, lips tight. "It would give me peace of mind, honey, just for basic things." I didn't want to hurt their feelings, and I didn't want to fight over something that sounded practical. I told myself it was a tool, nothing more. I met with a local attorney, signed a document that spelled out narrow authority, limited, specific, administrative only, no selling, no refinancing, no transferring property. I read those parts carefully and felt reassured. My father insisted he would only use it if I asked him to. "Of course," he said, "I would never do anything without you." I believed him because believing him was the easiest thing in the world. For a while, it stayed quiet. If my father picked up my mail, he brought it over neatly stacked. If a contractor needed access to my crawl space to check a leak, my father met him and called me afterward with a detailed summary. He liked being useful, and I liked not having to scramble mid-trip. Then, 2022 came with one long job after another. That fall, Tidewater Civil Group landed a major infrastructure upgrade outside Columbus, Ohio, and my role shifted from occasional travel to being on site almost constantly. I rented a short-term place near the project, a modest apartment with thin walls and a parking lot that smelled like wet asphalt. My suitcase stayed half unpacked, my days started before sunrise, and my evenings ended with spreadsheets and a sore lower back. It was in late November, just as the first real cold settled in, that my father called me at a time he never called. It was after 9 at night. I had just peeled off my boots and was standing at the sink rinsing dust out of my hair when my phone buzzed on the counter. I saw his name and felt a flicker of irritation, then concern. My parents didn't call late unless something was wrong. I swiped to answer. "Dad, what happened?" His voice came quick, clipped. "Nothing happened, we just need you to handle something." I turned the water off and braced my hip against the counter. "Handle what?" "Some paperwork related to the house. It's time sensitive." My stomach tightened. Time sensitive usually meant overdue. It usually meant he had decided something without asking first. I tried to keep my voice even. "What kind of paperwork?" He cleared his throat. "It's hard to explain over the phone. You just need to sign something or we might miss a window." "A window for what?" My mother came on the line suddenly, like she was waiting right beside him. "Honey, don't stress. It's just a form. Your father's trying to help. You're so busy." I stared at the blank wall above my sink. My brain searched for reasonable explanations. Tax document, insurance update, something about a repair permit. Still, an unease moved under my ribs like a warning. I said, "Email it to me. I'll look at it tonight." There was a pause, long enough to feel like someone exchanging a glance. My father said, "It would be easier if you were here." I almost laughed, but none of this was funny. I'm not there. I'm in Ohio. That's the point of why I signed that document in the first place. My mother said, "Just come home when you can, sweetheart. We can take care of it until then." That sentence sounded gentle, but it landed wrong. Take care of it until then, like it was already in motion, like the decision was already made, like my role was just to cooperate at the end. I swallowed. "How long do I have?" My father said, "Not long. Days, maybe. But don't worry, we'll handle it." I felt the weight of my own exhaustion pressing down, the kind that makes you choose sleep over suspicion. I wanted to trust them. I wanted my house to remain what it had always been to me, a quiet place waiting for my return, not a problem that could erupt from a phone call. I said, "I can't leave this site right now. We're in the middle of inspections. Send me whatever you have. If it's legitimate, I'll sign it electronically." My father exhaled sharply. "Fine, but don't delay." After I hung up, I stood there in the silence of the small apartment, listening to the heater click on and the distant, muffled sounds of someone else watching television through the wall. I should have opened my laptop immediately. I should have called the attorney who drafted the power of attorney. I should have driven straight to the airport. Instead, I told myself I would deal with it in the morning, after the concrete pour, after the safety meeting, after one more thing. I went to bed with my phone on the pillow beside me, waiting for an email that did not arrive that night, and I fell asleep with a faint, stubborn faith that my family might be complicated, but they would never cross a line they couldn't uncross. Chapter 2. When Trust Turned into Control. Morning came too fast. and with it the familiar rhythm of a job site that did not care about my unease. I woke before my alarm, checked my phone, and saw nothing new. No email from my father, no document, no explanation. The silence felt deliberate, like a door quietly closed instead of slammed. I dressed, drove to the site, and lost myself for a few hours in checklists and measurements, pretending the problem would stay suspended until I was ready to touch it. It did not. By the time I returned home a few weeks later, the unease had settled into something heavier. My house looked the same from the outside, same maple tree, same mailbox leaning slightly to the right, but inside, things felt off in small, maddening ways. The stack of mail I usually left untouched on the entry table was thinner than it should have been. A utility bill I knew I had not opened was already slit along the edge. When I checked my email that night, there was a message from my bank thanking me for updating my contact preferences. I stared at the screen, reading it twice, then a third time. I had not updated anything. I logged into my account, checked the activity log, and saw a note about a phone call made earlier that week. The timestamp matched a day I had been standing in mud, arguing with the subcontractor about rebar spacing. I called the bank the next morning during my drive to work. After navigating the usual menus, I reached a representative who pulled up my account and spoke in a tone that assumed familiarity. "Yes, we spoke with your authorized representative," she said. "Everything has been noted." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Authorized representative who? Your father, Grant Caldwell. He confirmed your mailing address and asked a few questions about upcoming statements. I swallowed. Did he make any changes? She hesitated. Nothing major, just ask that some notices be sent to him as well to help you stay organized. I pulled into a gas station and parked, heart thudding. He did that without me asking? She paused again. He was listed under your power of attorney. We assumed it was fine. After I hung up, I sat there longer than I needed to, watching people come and go with coffee cups and lottery tickets. I felt foolish for being surprised. I felt worse for realizing how easily it had happened. When I called my parents that evening, my father answered on the second ring, like he had been expecting me. "I spoke to the bank today," I said. "Why did you call them?" There was a beat of silence, then his familiar sigh. "I was helping you. You forget things when you are traveling." "I do not forget my bank preferences." My mother cut in before he could respond. "Marin, do not get upset. Your father was just trying to make things easier. You are always so busy." I pressed my fingers against my temple. "I did not ask for that. I need you to talk to me before you do things in my name." "You are overreacting," my mother said. "This is exactly what we meant about unnecessary tension. You signed the paperwork. You gave us permission." The words stung more than I expected. Permission, like I had handed over my judgment along with the signature. After that, the pattern repeated. A notice from my insurance company referencing a question about coverage I had not raised, a missed piece of mail that later turned up at my parents' house. Each time my father had an explanation, each time my mother urged calm. "Let it go. Do not make this bigger than it is." I started sleeping poorly. I found myself replaying conversations, wondering what else they had handled without me. One night, after another circular phone call that left me feeling small and unreasonable, I pulled the power of attorney document from the folder where I kept important papers. I read it slowly, line by line, sitting at my kitchen table under the harsh overhead light. The language was clear. Limited authority, administrative tasks only, no sale, no transfer, no encumbrance. It was all there in black and white. And yet, reading it, I felt something shift. I saw how easily someone could ignore those boundaries if they believed they knew better, or if they believed my approval was a formality, something that could be handled later. I called Susan Miller the next day. Susan and I had been friends since our 20s, since before marriages and divorces and career pivots reshaped us. She worked in human resources for a manufacturing company in town, the kind of job that made her fluent in policies and quiet disasters. We met for coffee at a place near her office, a small cafe that smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. "You look tired," she said, as she slid into the booth across from me. I told her everything: the missing mail, the bank call, the power of attorney, my parents' dismissive tone. It expected her to laugh it off, to tell me it was just family being family. Instead, she listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Marin, this sounds like financial control." The word landed hard between us. "That feels dramatic," I said. "They're my parents." "That does not make it impossible," she replied gently. "Sometimes it makes it easier." I shook my head. "They would never do anything malicious." Control doesn't always start as malicious. It often starts as concern, or convenience, or entitlement. I stared down at my coffee, watching the surface ripple as my hand trembled slightly. I wanted to reject what she was saying. Accepting it felt like accusing my parents of something I wasn't ready to name. "I think you should talk to a lawyer," she added, "just to understand your options." I told her I would think about it, which was my polite way of saying I wasn't ready. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing project timelines at my desk. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, local but unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello, this is Marin Caldwell." "Hi, Miss Caldwell. This is Thomas Reed with Reed and Lawson Realty. I'm calling to schedule the final walkthrough for your property." The words did not make sense at first. "Walkthrough for what?" "Your house on Maple Glen Road," he said. "We're coordinating with all parties ahead of closing." My mouth drew dry. Closing on what? There was a pause, the kind that carries confusion on the other end. "The sale of your home. We have you listed as the seller." I felt the room tilt slightly, like I had stood up too fast. I did not put my house up for sale. Another pause, longer this time. "Our records show authorization through a power of attorney. We've been working with your father." I hung up without saying goodbye. When I drove to my parents' house that evening, my hands shook the entire way. My father answered the door like nothing was wrong. "You could have told me," I said, as soon as I stepped inside. My voice was too loud, too sharp. "Told you what?" he asked, already defensive. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "We were just planning ahead," she said quickly. "You're never home. It seemed practical." Planning ahead does not involve contracts. It involves pretending I agreed to something I never agreed to. My father folded his arms. "You signed the paperwork. This is exactly why." I realized then that the line I thought existed had already been crossed, and the people who crossed it didn't believe they had done anything wrong. I left without resolving anything, my chest tight, my thoughts racing, knowing only one thing with certainty: whatever I thought my family would never do, they already had. Chapter 3. The Betrayal I Never Expected. The realization did not come all at once. It settled into me slowly, like cold seeping through concrete, impossible to ignore once it reached the bone. I drove home that night with my jaw clenched and my thoughts spiraling, replaying every conversation I had brushed aside, every time I told myself my parents meant well. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house looked unfamiliar, like something I was visiting rather than returning to. I barely slept. At dawn, I walked through each room, touching the door frames, the chipped corner of the kitchen counter, the windowsill where I used to line up small potted herbs. I kept thinking about the word planning ahead, the way my mother had said it, as if my life were a series of inconveniences they were solving without me. The next morning, I called Thomas Reed back. "I need everything you have," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Every document, every signature, every email." There was a pause, then a cautious shift in his tone. "Of course," he said. "I assumed you were aware. We were working directly with your authorized agent." "My father," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And your cousin, Claire Nolan. She handled most of the paperwork." The name hit harder than I expected. Claire. Family again. Another person I had trusted without thinking twice. I met Thomas at his office that afternoon. It sat above a bakery downtown, the smell of sugar and yeast drifting up the stairwell. He spread the documents across the conference table, neat and orderly, like this was any other transaction. The contract, the authorization forms, the closing schedule, and there it was, my father's signature, clean and confident, sitting where mine should have been. "This is not possible," I said. "That power of attorney does not allow this." Thomas rubbed the back of his neck. "It should not," he said carefully, "but it was presented as sufficient. Your cousin assured us everything was in order." I left with a folder tucked under my arm and a hollow feeling in my chest. On the drive to my parents' house, anger finally cut through the numbness. Not a sharp, explosive anger, but something heavier and more dangerous, the kind that makes you realize how much you have already lost. My parents were both home when I arrived. My father sat at the kitchen table reading the paper like it was a normal day. My mother stood at the sink, rinsing a plate that was already clean. I dropped the folder on the table. "You sold my house," I said. My father did not flinch. He folded the paper slowly. "We took care of it. You were never there. It made sense." "It does not make sense," I said, my voice shaking now. "It was not yours to sell." My mother turned, her eyes already wet. "Please do not raise your voice," she said. "We were just trying to help you." "Help me how?" I asked. "By signing my name to something I never agreed to? By letting me find out from a stranger?" My father leaned back in his chair. "You are being dramatic. We did what was best for you." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something, anything that would challenge him. She wiped her cheeks and shook her head slightly. "Please, do not tear the family apart over this." That was the moment I understood. Not just what they had done, but who they were willing to protect. It was not me. It was the version of the family that looked calm from the outside, even if it hollowed me out on the inside. I left again, this time without shouting, without another word. In my car, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let myself cry until my chest hurt. I thought about every holiday, every favor, every quiet compromise. I thought about how easy it would be for them to tell people I was overreacting, ungrateful, cold. That fear followed me home. It sat with me as I paced my living room, now knowing it was no longer fully mine. Taking legal action felt like lighting a match in a room full of memories. I imagined my parents' faces, my expended family whispering, the word heartless passing from mouth to mouth. I called Susan. "I think I need a lawyer," I said. She didn't say "I told you so." "I know someone," she replied. "Mark Delaney, property law. He's steady. He'll explain everything without pushing you." I met Mark 2 days later in an office that smelled faintly of old books and coffee. He was in his 50s, calm, with a voice that didn't rush. I handed him the folder and watched his brow furrow as he read. "This is a misuse of a power of attorney, clear as day." I stared at him. "It feels like revenge," I said, "like I'm punishing my own parents." He rubbed the back of his neck. "This is not revenge. This is protecting your legal rights. What they did was not a misunderstanding. It was a violation." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but clarity. "So I'm not cruel for stopping it," I said. "You would be negligent if you did not," he replied gently. As I left his office, the weight of what lay ahead settled over me. The fight would be long. The fallout would be real. But for the first time since the phone call in Ohio, I understood the truth without trying to soften it. My trust had not just been misplaced, it had been taken and used against me. Chapter 4: Silence, Evidence, and the Long Wait. What followed was not dramatic. It was slow, procedural, and exhausting in ways I had never prepared for. The weeks after my meeting with Mark blurred together into a routine of emails, scanned documents, and careful phone calls. He warned me early on that this would take time, that there would be long stretches where nothing seemed to happen, followed by sudden flurries of activity that left me drained. He was right. The case moved forward inch by inch, stretching through 2023 and deep into 2024, and every step forced me to confront how thoroughly my life had been entangled without my consent. We started with the power of attorney. Mark asked me to walk him through exactly when I signed it, where, and under what circumstances. I pulled bank statements, emails from that period, calendar entries that showed how often I was traveling. We highlighted the language that limited my father's authority, the clauses that explicitly forbade selling or transferring property. On paper, it was clear. In reality, it felt surreal to see my own trust turned into evidence. My cousin Claire stopped returning my calls almost immediately. When Mark reached out to her directly, she responded once, briefly, claiming she had relied on my father's representations and assumed I was aware. After that, silence. Her social media accounts went quiet. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she had stepped back from several listings. I tried not to feel satisfaction at that. I told myself this was not about punishment. Still, I could not ignore the sense that the world was finally catching up to the truth. My father, on the other hand, doubled down. Every communication from him minimized what he had done. He told Mark it was a misunderstanding, that he had only acted to protect me. When I spoke to him once, against my better judgment, his tone was clipped and defensive. "You are blowing this out of proportion," he said. "You are making us look bad. I am responding to what you did, not what it looks like." My mother stayed quiet. She stopped calling. When she did speak to me, it was through messages that carried the same plea over and over. "Please think about the family. Do you really want this on record? This is hurting everyone." What she never said was that it was hurting me. The isolation crept in gradually. Invitations to family gatherings stopped arriving. An aunt I used to talk to weekly left my messages unread. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that people did not know what to say. Then someone finally did say it. At a small holiday get-together I attended out of obligation, an aunt pulled me aside near the coat rack. "Could you not have handled this privately?" she asked softly. "Your parents are so upset." I felt the familiar pressure to apologize, to smooth things over. Instead, I said nothing. I picked up my coat and left early, sitting in my car afterward with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the dashboard until my breathing slowed. Susan was there when the loneliness pressed hardest. She texted me after court dates, even when nothing happened. "You showed up. That counts," she wrote once. Mark remained steady, explaining each development in plain language, never promising outcomes he could not guarantee. "This system moves slowly," he reminded me. "That does not mean it is not working." In early 2024, we learned that the buyer, Thomas Reed's client, had officially withdrawn. The irregularities were too significant. Title insurance would not move forward. The sale stalled, then collapsed. When Mark called to tell me, I sat at my kitchen table and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for months. "That helps," he said. "It does not end it, but it helps." The financial strain on my parents became harder for them to hide after that. They had already spent part of the proceeds. Returning funds was no longer theoretical. Neighbors started asking questions. Someone mentioned seeing a notice posted on their door. The quiet confidence my father once carried drained away, replaced with bitterness. When the hearing date finally arrived, I took the day off work and drove myself to the courthouse. I wore a simple blouse and slacks, nothing that drew attention. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, functional and plain. The judge listened without expression as Mark laid out the facts, as documents were entered into the record, as my father's attorney struggled to justify actions that were clearly outside the authority granted. I did not look at my parents while it happened. I focused on the wood grain of the bench in front of me, the hum of the lights overhead, the sound of my own heartbeat. When the judge spoke, it was brief. The transaction was invalid, the power of attorney had been misused, ownership of the property was to be restored to me. That was it. No speech, no apology demanded, no vindication beyond the ruling itself. Outside the courthouse, Susan hugged me tightly. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "It is done," I replied. Driving home, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, what settled over me was quiet. Relief, yes, but also a strange grief for the family I thought I had, for the version of myself who believed trust alone could protect her. That night, I sat alone in my living room, lights low, listening to the familiar sounds of my house. It was still mine, legally, unquestionably, and yet everything felt different. I knew there was still one more reckoning ahead, not in a courtroom, but in my own understanding of what this had cost and what it had given back. Chapter 5. What Justice Really Looks Like. I thought the ruling would be the end of the story. I thought once the paperwork was corrected and my name was restored where it belonged, the rest would fall into place on its own. But the truth was, the court gave me back the house, and I still had to figure out what to do with the people who had tried to take it. A week after the hearing, a certified letter arrived addressed to me. It confirmed the judge's decision, the correction of title, and the obligations that followed. My parents were required to return what they had taken. They were not going to jail. No one was putting handcuffs on my father in a dramatic scene outside his front porch. The consequence was quieter, but it was real. Money had to be accounted for. Documents were scrutinized. A record existed now. The story could not be softened or rewritten into something harmless. When I held that letter in my hands, I did not feel victorious. I felt like someone who had just walked out of a storm and realized her clothes were still soaked. Mark called later that afternoon. "You are officially back on title," he said. "No clouds, no disputes. It is clean." "Thank you," I replied. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. He paused. "How are you doing?" I stared out the kitchen window at my backyard, at the fence line I needed to repaint, at the bare branches of the maple tree. "I feel tired," I said, "like I aged 2 years in one." "That makes sense," he replied. "Do not let anyone tell you this was easy." After we hung up, I sat at the table and let the quiet settle. I realized I had been bracing for impact for so long that my body did not know how to relax. Even inside my own home, I kept waiting for another shoe to drop, another letter, another call, another betrayal. It came, just not in the way I expected. My mother showed up at my door on a Saturday morning, alone. She did not call first. She stood on the porch with her purse clutched close to her chest, her hair brushed carefully, her eyes swollen as if she had not been sleeping. Seeing her there pulled something in me, a reflex from childhood, the part of me that wanted to take her inside and fix whatever was wrong. I opened the door, but did not step aside. "Marin," she said softly, "can we talk?" I hesitated, then moved back enough to let her in. She walked into my living room like she was afraid the walls might reject her. She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded tightly. "I did not want it to go this far," she said. I looked at her, waiting. She swallowed. "Your father thought he was helping. He truly did." "That's what you keep saying, helping, like I asked for it." Her eyes filled again. "He's proud," she said. "He hates being wrong." "And you hate conflict," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "So you let him do it." Her shoulders sagged. She nodded once, very small. "I tried," she whispered. I did not believe her, not fully. Not because she never tried, but because she tried in the way that made her comfortable, not in the way that would have protected me. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said, quieter now. I'm saying it because I need you to hear it. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. He's furious, she admitted. He says you humiliated him. I let out a bitter laugh that surprised even me. He humiliated himself. She looked up, startled, as if the idea had never occurred to her. People keep acting like I did something to him, but he did this. He crossed the line. I did not invent the consequences. My mother stared at her hands. He doesn't have the money, she said. Not all of it. He already spent some. The truth of that landed like a weight. So much of what they had done made sense in the ugliest way. The entitlement, the urgency, the refusal to involve me. They didn't just think they had the right. They needed the outcome. That's not my problem, I said, and I meant it. Her eyes lifted again, searching my face like she was looking for the daughter who used to compromise first. You have changed, she whispered. I nodded. I had to. She left a little while later, moving slowly, like she carried more than a purse. When the door clicked shut behind her, the house felt quiet in a new way, not lonely, just clear. I sat down on my couch and looked around the familiar space. The framed photo on the wall, the throw blanket folded over the armrest, the scuff mark near the hallway that I kept meaning to repaint. These small, ordinary details were what I fought for. Not just property, a life I controlled. Over the next months, pieces of news filtered back to me without me asking. Claire lost clients. People in town started talking about her careless paperwork, about how she'd gotten too comfortable cutting corners for family. Susan told me, gently, that her name had become a warning among local agents. My father stopped attending certain gatherings. Some neighbors avoided eye contact. Others looked at him with a kind of quiet judgment that hurt more than open confrontation. He had built his identity as being the competent one, the one who knew best. Now the record said otherwise. I never asked for updates. I didn't need them. What surprised me most was how little satisfaction I felt watching karma unfold. I did not feel joy. I felt distance, like I had stepped out of a pattern that used to own me, and now I could see it from the outside. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home and made dinner. Nothing fancy, pasta, a salad, a glass of iced tea. I ate at my kitchen table with the window open, listening to the cicadas and the far-off sound of someone mowing a lawn. I realized I was breathing normally again. My shoulders weren't locked up around my ears. My phone was quiet. My home felt like mine. Justice had not looked like punishment. It had looked like paperwork done correctly. It had looked like boundaries holding firm. It had looked like me waking up and knowing no one could decide for me anymore. If you've ever been in a situation where keeping the peace meant giving up pieces of yourself, I want you to think about this. If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep everyone comfortable, or would you protect your own security, even if it made you the villain in someone else's story? Have you ever been expected to sacrifice what you earned just because family knows best? If you have, tell me what you did, or what you wish you had done. I did not win against anyone. I simply stopped letting other people decide my life for me.